you want to be comfortable and you want to have friends and you want to be like early days, being like short, being 5 feet tall.
Danny Devito is 80. But behind the laughs and wild characters, did you know he's been quietly battling a painful secret for decades? From luxury mansions to collapsing off camera, the truth about how he really lives now will leave you stunned. He gave us some of the funniest moments on screen. But what was Hollywood hiding about him? Stick around. You're about to see a side of Danny Devito that no one talks about. You want comfort, belonging, to feel seen. But what if your very existence felt like a mistake from day one? For Danny Devito, now 80, that truth was always simmering beneath the spotlight. His story begins not with fame, but with rejection. Even before he could walk, his mother confessed she never wanted another child. And his father? The man behind the candy counter by day became a storm no one could outrun by night. Cops were called to their home so often, neighbors stopped asking questions. But behind the laughs, Devito was silently enduring something even deeper. A rare condition that made every step, every movement, a battle. Hollywood once handed him a check to change who he was. He didn't just say no. He destroyed the offer, literally. Born in Neptune, New Jersey in 1944, Devito entered a world that seemed determined to keep him small in more ways than one. His mother, Julia, was already in her 40s and emotionally worn from raising a family. She later admitted, "I didn't want him." Those words could crush anyone. For Danny, they became gasoline on a fire he kept burning inside. Even as a child, he understood he had to fight for space in a world that wasn't built for him. But the bigger enemy lived inside the walls of his own home. By day, his father, Daniel Sr., charmed the town with his candy shop smile. But when darkness fell and the bottle tipped, his transformation was terrifying. The shouting, the smashed glass, the heavy footsteps Danny memorized like lines from a play. He learned to read danger before it erupted. Sometimes he hid in a closet. Other nights, he escaped to a neighbor's porch. Between 1950 and 1955, their home was visited by police at least 17 times. That fear stayed with him, but it also fueled something rare, a determination to break the cycle. By his early teens, Danny was watching his neighborhood unravel. Heroin was invading street corners, and two of his close friends never made it to 16. He saw the writing on the wall. At 14, he scraped together $237 from small jobs, and with help from a local priest, convinced his parents to let him apply to a private prep school. His timing was precise. He made the ask when his father was sober and regretful. His mother, maybe burdened by her earlier rejection, said yes. That decision pulled him off a path that swallowed most of his peers. Only 3 of his 12 childhood friends avoided prison or addiction. What most people didn't know was that Danny wasn't just battling memories. He was living with Fairbanks disease, a rare genetic disorder that limited his height and riddled his joints with pain. Standing just 4 feet 10 inches, he endured constant aches in his back, hips, and knees. His pain often hovered at a level most would consider unbearable, and yet he never let it define him. He did his own stunts, collapsed multiple times during shoots like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and still carried on as if it were part of the performance. Doctors offered medication. He refused. Instead, he quietly donated over $12 million to help others with bone conditions, never putting his name on it. He didn't want applause. He wanted relief. For others. Long before he landed in front of a camera, Danny was mastering scissors and curlers. A trained beautician, he clocked 1,500 hours to earn his license and worked at his sister Angela's salon, humorously named Curl Up and Die. Clients booked months in advance. His signature look, the Neptune twist, won him awards. But fate had other plans. One day, while fixing a client's hair, her husband, an off-Broadway producer, suggested Danny audition for a play. It wasn't something he had dreamed of, but he gave it a shot. In 1962, he applied to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, hoping to study makeup. They asked him to perform a monologue. On a whim, he acted out a scene from The Rainmaker. It landed. They offered him a slot, not in makeup, but in acting. He hesitated, went back to the salon. 3 days later, they called again, with a scholarship. That second call shifted everything. He moved to New York and shared a dingy apartment with a roommate who went by Mike, better known later as Michael Douglas. Their place was crawling with roaches and ice cold in the winter. Rent was $75, and sometimes they couldn't make it. They ate canned beans and used their last few dollars to print headshots. While Douglas slowly booked gigs, Danny faced rejection after rejection. But their bond stuck. And years later, it would change everything.
Between 1967 and 1970, Devito auditioned 248 times and landed just 3 small jobs, barely clearing $800 in total. He parked cars, cleaned animal cages at the LA Zoo, and even posed as a human mannequin in a department store window. He once lived in his VW Beetle and showered at the YMCA. Producers told him to get facial surgery. One studio offered him what would now be nearly $1 million to change his face and legs. Instead, he burned the contract on a beach. "I'd rather be a first-rate version of myself," he told one agent, "than a second-rate version of someone else." His first big shot came not with glamour, but grit. His old roommate, Michael Douglas, produced One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and Danny, who'd already played Martini in a stage version, was ready. The role earned him just under 6 minutes of screen time, but etched his name into Hollywood. The studio wanted a taller actor. Director Milos Forman stood by Danny. The film went on to win 5 Oscars. Danny didn't get one, but he finally got seen. Then came the real gamble. In 1978, he turned down 3 films to audition for a sitcom, Taxi. Everyone told him it was career suicide. His own agent warned him against it. But Danny felt something in that script. At the audition, he performed a 7-minute monologue that left the room silent. ABC had doubts about his height, but creator James L. Brooks threatened to quit if they didn't cast him. Danny didn't even ask for more money. He just said yes. He didn't hesitate. The moment the offer came in, even at 40% less than what his co-stars were getting, he signed it. For Danny DeVito, this was never about the paycheck. It was about proving he belonged. After nearly 200 rejections in just 3 years, where casting agents repeatedly told him he wasn't tall enough, wasn't good-looking enough, wasn't normal enough, finally, everything turned around. Taxi premiered, and in just 8 episodes, DeVito became a sensation. Over 11,000 fan letters poured in, not for the leading man, but for the short, angry dispatcher with a voice you couldn't forget. People weren't just watching Louis De Palma, they were obsessed. He was crude, snarky, mean, and viewers loved every second of it. The network's mailroom was flooded with complaints, 3 to 5 letters per episode, and yet, that only fueled DeVito more. Before filming, he'd sit alone, quietly summoning memories of every rejection he'd ever endured. That frustration became his fire. That fire became Louis, and that character, it became iconic. By 1980, over 90% of Americans could recognize Louis De Palma just by silhouette or voice alone. That's not fame, that's cultural imprint. The booth DeVito worked from was built low to match his stature, and it became one of the most famous set pieces in TV history. The awards soon followed. First a Golden Globe in 1980, then an Emmy in '81. Nobody saw it coming. Louis wasn't a hero, he wasn't even nice. But audiences couldn't take their eyes off him. When he stepped up to accept the Emmy, he simply said, "Thank you, I'm really happy about this. Taxi is the best show on television." 12 words, the shortest acceptance speech in Emmy history, but it said everything. Vegas oddsmakers had Jack Albertson as the clear favorite that year. DeVito's win shocked the room. Behind the scenes, some Emmy judges didn't even want to nominate him. They thought his character was too abrasive. But the voters proved something bigger. America could root for the underdog and even love the villain. That moment shifted how television characters were written for decades. NBC tried to lure him away with a staggering offer: $175,000 per episode for a new show, 11 times what he was making. He turned it down. Loyalty mattered more than money. He wasn't going to abandon his cast. And then, in the most unexpected twist, romance found him. Rhea Perlman didn't walk into his life the way you'd imagine. She came to his apartment to break up with his roommate. 6 hours later, she and Danny were deep in conversation. He later said he knew within 22 minutes she was the one. Within a year, she joined Taxi, playing Lewis's love interest. The producers had no clue they were actually together. Their chemistry? It was real. So real, in fact, that they moved in together after 2 weeks, into a cramped 450-square-foot apartment. Even after they married in 1982, they kept separate dressing rooms on set. No favoritism, just professionalism. What fans didn't know was that Rhea and Danny weren't just building a relationship, they were building an empire. In 1983, while still filming Taxi, they started Jersey Films. No red carpets, no press releases, just late-night meetings and weekend work. Quietly, strategically. Over the next 40 years, they'd appear in 17 projects together, bound by a simple promise. They'd never go more than 2 weeks without creating something together. Once Taxi ended, Devito did something rare. He didn't fade. He rose. His first big film role came in Terms of Endearment in 1983, an Oscar winner. Then, in '84, he lit up Romancing the Stone, raking in $115 million on a $10 million budget. He returned for the sequel, The Jewel of the Nile, and even took smaller roles like in Johnny Dangerously just to stay visible. He was building something larger than a resume. He was crafting staying power. Then came Ruthless People in 1986. He played a cold-hearted man who refuses to pay ransom for his kidnapped wife, and the audience loved it. The film made $71 million on a $7.5 million budget. DeVito's performance? So outrageous it stole the whole movie. That role earned him another Golden Globe nomination and confirmed something big. He wasn't afraid to be hated. In fact, he leaned into it. In '87, he made his directorial debut with Throw Mama from the Train. He insisted on directing if he was going to act in it and won the studio over. He picked filming spots across LA, tried to cast Brian De Palma in a cameo, and shot a climactic train scene over 6 days using a private track. Anne Ramsey, who played Mama, did many of her own stunts, bruised, stitched up, and determined. The film earned DeVito glowing reviews, and yet another Golden Globe nomination. Then came 1988, the year of twins, DeVito, Schwarzenegger, as brothers. It sounded absurd, until it made $216 million worldwide. None of them took a salary. Instead, they took 40% of the profits, a massive gamble, a massive win. DeVito made upwards of $35 million. That deal alone changed how Hollywood viewed actor deals forever. And while the cameras focused on his on-screen rise, DeVito was shaping the industry off-screen. He'd already directed The Ratings Game in 1984 and helmed an episode of Amazing Stories in '86. In 1989, he brought back his Romancing the Stone co-stars for The War of the Roses. The film's emotional chaos and dark humor struck a nerve. In Germany, the title even became slang for nasty divorces. From the surreal credits crafted by Saul and Elaine Bass to DeVito's sharp direction, it was clear he had found his rhythm behind the lens. In 1992, he dove headfirst into the shadows. Tim Burton's Batman Returns transformed him into the Penguin. It wasn't just prosthetics, it was a full-body transformation. Fans were horrified and mesmerized. That same year, he directed Hoffa, starring Jack Nicholson. It was a gamble, serious, heavy, political. But DeVito wanted to prove he could handle it, and he did. Also in '92, he officially launched Jersey Films. Partnering with Michael Shamberg and Stacey Sher, they were about to shape indie film forever. Just 2 years later, they took a bet on a strange, gritty script no one else wanted. The film? Pulp Fiction. They gave Tarantino money and space. The rest is history. By 1996, he directed Matilda, casting himself and Rhea as the world's worst parents. But behind the scenes, their hearts showed. Young Mara Wilson's mother was battling illness, and the DeVitos stepped in, like family. Danny even brought a cut of the movie to the hospital, so her mother could watch it before passing. For Mara, they weren't co-stars. They were love and comfort when she needed it most. And just like that, Danny DeVito proved something timeless. Greatness isn't always loud, tall, or pretty. Sometimes it's raw, relentless, and unforgettable. In 1999, Danny DeVito took a risk that most producers wouldn't dare. Instead of chasing blockbuster numbers, he focused on legacy. Man on the Moon, a tribute to the bizarre genius of Andy Kaufman, didn't rake in millions, but it carved a space in cinematic history. DeVito had once shared the screen with Kaufman in Taxi, and now he was helping Jim Carrey fully embody the elusive comedian. The performance was haunting, praised by critics and peers alike, but as the curtain closed on the film's lukewarm box office run, DeVito remained fiercely loyal. That loyalty wasn't about money, it was about honoring the spirit of the misunderstood. And yet, behind his steadfast grin, Danny was battling something darker. Few knew that DeVito had been silently enduring Fairbanks disease, a rare and painful bone disorder. Imagine acting through scenes while your joints scream in agony, only to collapse once the cameras stop rolling. That was his reality. Hollywood told him to stay quiet. They warned that if he appeared fragile, roles would vanish. So he smiled through it, cracked jokes, did stunts that pushed his limits, but every scene was a war with pain. On It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, he gave everything, even when he could barely stand. When he finally broke his silence in 2025, it wasn't just for himself, it was for everyone living in silence. "If I stay quiet," he said, "how will anyone take this seriously?" Then came a twist no one expected. In 2006, DeVito joined It's Always Sunny, a low-budget, chaotic comedy that wasn't expected to survive. The network hesitated. "He's too famous," they said. But show creator Rob McElhenney fought tooth and nail. And the result? Ratings exploded by 227%. DeVito could have demanded millions. Instead, he took just $70,000 per episode. Not for the paycheck, but for the creative freedom. And it paid off. He became the beating heart of the show. Whether diving naked across a bar floor or crawling out of a couch covered in sweat, Danny's fearlessness became legend. But behind the scenes, his body was breaking down. Multiple surgeries, spinal disc damage, 4 a.m. therapy. Every laugh was earned with pain. The real heartbreak came in 2012. After 3 decades together, DeVito and Perlman quietly separated. Fans were shocked. They had seemed like one of the last unbreakable couples in Hollywood. The signs were subtle: a grueling work schedule, whispers of a growing friendship with a younger colleague. They tried therapy, 38 sessions, but couldn't find their way back. And yet, there was still love. In 2013, they were seen holding hands again. Danny had rented the same spot from their first date. They gave it one last try, lasting 4 more years before calling it quits for good in 2017. But here's the twist: they never divorced. They simply redefined love. He bought a house less than a mile from hers. They met every Wednesday and Sunday, still shared a Netflix account, still texted during shows. Isn't that a kind of romance too? In 2023, Danny made headlines again, but this time not for a role. He donated $500,000 to the very hospital he was born in, now the Jersey Shore University Medical Center. It wasn't just a check, it was a message. Giving back matters. The hospital had just been ranked among the top 5% for clinical care, and Danny's donation helped fund critical patient services. This wasn't a photo op, it was personal, a full-circle moment for a man who once entered the world in that very building. And then came the firestorm. May 2025, Jimmy Kimmel Live. What started as a playful interview turned tense, fast. No one knows what sparked it, but by the second segment, Danny had stormed off. Clips went viral. Fans were torn. Was this honesty or instability? Comedians like Bill Burr backed him. Others mocked him. DeVito didn't issue a formal apology. Instead, he posted, "Sometimes the truth isn't easy to hear, especially under the lights." A bold statement, but the fallout was immediate. Some appearances canceled. Whispers of a silent blacklist began swirling, and yet, he didn't flinch. Now, at 79, DeVito is busier than ever, producing a sports docuseries called Game 7 for Prime Video, alongside his kids Jake and Lucy. He calls it his weird love letter to underdogs. He's not slowing down, just shifting gears. And of course, he's still with It's Always Sunny, still scheming as Frank Reynolds. 2 decades later, the character is iconic, proof that reinvention never expires. Let's break down Devito's luxury lifestyle. Over the years, he's owned a Mercedes-Benz S-Class, a Rolls-Royce Silver Spur, and a custom Tesla Model X. He's worn limited edition Patek Philippe timepieces and vintage Rolex Submariners. The Beverly Hills estate was only one of several properties he's held, including a Manhattan condo and a vacation home in Italy. While he hasn't owned a private jet outright, he's part of a shared fractional ownership program through NetJets. His investments? He co-founded Jersey Films, which backed Pulp Fiction and Aaron Brockovich, and owns stakes in eco-friendly startups and streaming production ventures. Insurance-wise, he's had comprehensive policies on health, disability, and even production delay coverage for his projects. Thanks for joining us on this wild, bittersweet ride through Danny DeVito's untold story. Like, comment, and subscribe, because legends like Danny deserve to be remembered, not just watched.